who were involved in making it come to life. Join us as we go behind the door.
Good evening, roomies, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Door with the Grey Rooms podcast. I am your host, Brooks Bigley, and with me tonight is Matthew Fowler, the author of Season 4, Episode 9, entitled The Withering Room. How are you this evening, Matthew?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It took many mountains to climb over for us to get to this point, but I'm so excited that you're here to discuss this story with me tonight. This is a very intense story. If I can ask you, whereabouts are you located?
I'm in Milford, Connecticut, a pleasant little coastal town.
Oh, all the way on the East Coast. Oh, you wouldn't be our first coastal town author. We had one a few episodes back. It was a beautiful story, like a maritime story almost. We are here to talk about your story, The Withering Room, and this story, we're getting right back on track here with these beautiful slow burn stories that have these characters that kind of unfold as you listen. You know, we were not dropped into any kind of serious action here. We basically, start with your narrator, Elias, and he's just wanting to enjoy his normal, everyday, tranquil life, I suppose, until this strange woman moves in. And wow, she just makes a lot of funny bump in the night sounds, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's very active, very confident, and she knows what she's about.
She definitely does. The story seemed like such kind of like that classic, to me, she's a succubus. I get the inference that she just lives to consume people. But of course, this is set in modern day, and there's nothing else fantastical going on around the characters. She's just clearly trying to live your average normal life, but she has this desire and this need to consume people, and we don't even find that out until the very, very, very end. But you did put kind of a few clues, with him seeing her door open, and she's got those little figurines, the way that she was really upset about him wanting to touch her box as she was moving in. What is your wheelhouse of horror here? How did you come about with this concept that you turned into this story for us?
I'm going to be honest with you. This is a completely new venture for me. I've never done anything like this before. I first heard about the Grey Rooms on Horror Tree, which is I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a nice little platform where they give you little rundowns of who's accepting material. And the Grey Rooms was on there, and I read your description of what you were looking for, so I know one of the things that you were looking for or criteria was that somebody had to die at the end. Mm-hmm. Check. And I was careful with the word count. So how I got introduced to Jessime, I do not know, but she definitely came trudging out of the brain, and all the other people just came trudging out and demanded their say, and I said I'd be happy to accommodate you. So.
Ah, excellent. I've heard other authors say that, where they say their characters write themselves, basically. And just as the author, they're just kind of there to record the activities of, their characters in the story. So you said that you started with Jessime first, and then started to craft the story around her?
Well, first it started really, as the script went, with Elias grumbling and complaining that his life is being interrupted by all this activity. Mm-hmm. And he really just doesn't take a shine because he has a certain way of being. He's very sort of uptight and upright, and this is definitely this boundary, and this is this boundary.
Right.
And when Jessime confronts him in the beginning, they're kind of mirror in a way, because she also has her very distinct boundaries, and she's a very clear communicator. Don't don't touch the box, put the box down. And she's certainly not going to say to him what she's about. She's definitely trying to keep her distance, and he's picking up little clues here and there. She really does not want his attention at all, because she's trying to live her own existence in the only way she knows how. She's a real top predator, I guess you could say.
Right. But now what about the parts where she kind of seemed like she was flaunting the fact that she would bring people home? Like, she certainly didn't try to hide the woman that she brought home when Elias was, I guess, in the hallway or something to see them come. So was there maybe an edge to her that she was proud to show off a little bit, or?
Oh, sure. She's very strong. She comes in with a lot of fanfare. She doesn't, everybody else, she's just like sort of a swinger, I guess you could say, and they're both intoxicated. They've had a little bit too much to drink, but Anwen is very vulnerable, and Jessime is still very much in control. She's got to get that lady in there, so...
Right.
So she does sort of, in that regard, in that point, she does sort of rub it in Yurabi's nose there and say, look at this. Well, you're alone. You don't have anything,
Right. And she wasn't the first to. I think when Elias tried to complain to, what is it? Not the landlord, not the manager, the landlord of the building. Yes, Mr. Zone. Mr. Zone made kind of the same almost inference as like, oh, well, you're just alone and you clearly need to have your lights turned on.
Yeah, exactly.
So Elias kind of drips with this, like, everything has to be a certain way and everything fits into the ice cube tray perfectly. And then, oh my gosh, so this is deviating from what I want. I don't like this. And so clearly
exactly.
That almost sounds like an anxious person, kind of. Like, everything is okay as long as it goes my way.
Right.
Everyone around him is so loosey-goosey, it seems like.
But he's not entirely innocent. He's not. He does have his grime side, because he's, when Mrs. Tiptrunk says, you only talk to me when you want some dirt on somebody. He does try to find out the finer little flaws of other tenants, and he's not all that whole.
Well, and that fits his character of needing everything to follow its course and be what it is, and he seems to be like that neighbor where as long as you're, if you're not bothering him, he doesn't seem like he's gonna bother you, and he even put up with Jessime and all these sounds at night, and clearly just the rompous sexual activities that she was not exactly trying to hide per se, at least auditorily.
Right.
So he he definitely seemed to be getting stressed out by having this presence, but at the same time, he was curious. He wanted to know why. Why was this woman this way?
Right.
So as you were starting to connect these dots, and you formed these characters, and you're setting them in motion against each other, how then did you start to kind of plot out the idea of her, being the succubus, and like how her victims basically were turned into these little figurines? How did that all begin?
Well, I don't want to cop out and say that's hard to say, but I've seen so many films and TV shows and all kinds of things. There are certain themes that I'm more attracted to than others. Like, for instance, I'm attracted to energy transfer stories a lot, entity transfer stories a lot. There was a Star Trek episode called Turnabout Intruder where it was one of the last things I ever shot, where Captain Kirk's entity, his soul, was placed in somebody else's body entirely. That's always fascinated me, and things about energy going back and forth between people. And when you really have got someone who is, that's almost their duty in life, is to suck you dry of every possible thing that you can give them, and you just shrivel up into these little... Also, I hate to say it, but a lot of people who are unfortunately serial killers do keep some sort of trophy very often of the people they've extinguished. And so those were her little trophies of as she's gone along in life. And they never last. I mean, they have a certain shelf life, and then poof, they're gone.
Right, yeah, you mentioned there were like a little scene where, I guess when he startled her,
yes,
she dropped one of the figurines and noted how it just kind of disappeared into dust.
Yes.
Yeah.
She doesn't like to lose her trophies that easy.
Right. And it's beautiful, too, that we don't really ever need to know exactly what was happening. Like, he didn't bust into the room and see her sucking anybody's life down, but we definitely can infer that happened.
Sure.
So that was the beauty also of your story, that there were no, like, wait, but I'm confused. I don't understand. How did that happen? Like, you did a great job at just explaining just enough to keep it going. When it came to, basically that ending where, man, he was damned for going over there with her knocking. He saw her falling apart. Like, it's the picture is gradually unfolding for him as to possibly what's happening, but he just didn't bother to put those two together. Sees this drunk man come, home with her. She's clearly just desperate as all hell to get this guy into her place. And he already, both him and Mrs. Tiptrunk know that people come, but they don't leave. So some mystery is afoot, and Elias is just blowing past all those red flags. And he's like, oh, this is a great idea. She's asking me to come over. Why don't I just go in there and check on her? So I almost feel like, that's his fault. It's his fault that he got caught in all this.
Yeah, but the attitudes of both of those characters sort of shifted, because the one thing, I don't know where this came from, but she becomes very vulnerable, where what she uses to capture these people and entice them to come back with her is not working anymore. And she just doesn't understand. It's like, I had this technique and it doesn't work. Now what am I going to do? And she gets very desperate. And he starts to, that facade, that barrier of his, it starts to go down a notch or two. And he's becoming a little bit more sorry, feels sorry for her. Like, it's to the point where, let's see, that part where she's going down the hallway and she's trying to find a key and she can't find it, and Elias comes over to her and just suggests, it could be in your pocketbook maybe, and he didn't have to do that. Certainly, he could have just let her get all flustered out there, but he does change. He feels a little bit more empathetic towards her, and she just gets more frustrated and more afraid and more vulnerable. And I thought they did such a beautiful job with that as she was crying and sobbing. That really touched me. I thought that was very nicely done.
Oh, you're talking about in terms of hearing the episode.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that feel for you to have written, this story, and then it became this like 25 minute audio drama? Like, how did that feel to hear that back?
I just was absolutely totally amazed. It was done so very, very well. It was, I just never experienced anything like it. I kind of felt like the cartoonist Chaz Adams when he was watching the Addams Family TV show for the first time, when he was watching all his characters come into life, so to speak. The attitudes of the characters were spot on. They were also given a dimension that I didn't perceive for them. It was very good and gritty. It had a nice grit to it that held everything together. I love that they gave Elias this English accent.
Yeah, Nathan Blades is the actor, and he's new with us on this show. Because we do try to employ lots of different actors, because we have so many. We're an anthology show, so we have so many different stories. You don't want. Per se, you don't really want to hear the same 5 people doing it over and over and over again.
Right. Oh, sure.
But yeah, he definitely brought that measured tone, I think, to the character of Elias. and that because he pretty much is the same guy from the beginning of the story until the end of his demise, And then conversely, we had Erin Lillis, who plays Jessamy, and she is a fantastic actress. She's been with us for several years, and she plays good guys, bad guys, demons, monsters, innocent victims. She does the whole thing, and just the way that she boom, right in your face is Jessamy in the beginning. Don't touch my box. I'll bring a lawsuit against you. Very,
that's right.
Very just very not intimidating, but just she just knows what she wants. She's just in charge of herself. But then by the end, that desperation of just she's falling apart literally and mentally. It sounds like almost, even akin to almost like a drug addict that needs I'll just do anything for that last hit. She was
right.
She brought home this guy, Eddie, that was clearly drunk, and, we don't really know who he was, but he was talking about his mom and missing his mother. He just seemed very, very, she had gone out to pick apples, but by the end of the day, she's just throwing anything into the basket, basically.
She'll take any apple at the bottom of the barrel right now.
Right. Yep. So Erin Lillis is so good at portraying all those little nuances that we need for people. So that's so great that you enjoyed listening to this story. Do you listen to any podcasts or any other type of audio dramas?
It's that's very important to me. Over the years, I have amassed quite a lot of recordings of all kinds of things, poetry and novels, and I, as someone who is a very good reader, is very important. There are certain stories that I will go back to, and they have to be read by a certain person in a certain way, or else I won't listen to them. But that's very, very important. I listen to many things. Excellent.
And now we've added this to the pile. Have you written anything that's been turned into anything like this before?
Never.
Okay. What is your experience with writing, if I might ask?
Well, in the beginning, I was always sort of scribbling something down, and it alternated a lot with painting, because I'm also a painter, and the writing, and it depends which twin sort of would grab me and, by the shirt and say, you got to pay attention to me now, And so lately, though, I've been focusing more on the writing part. I used to write a lot of poetry. Really used to focus on haiku writing, because haikus, if you come across a really good haiku, that's just great. Because haikus are so small, and you have to deal with such a limit of syllables, and they can be as explosive as atoms if you get a real good one. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I just decided, well, I'm going to just see how I do with some prose, kind of play it out. And so I was working with that for a long time. And, when I write, I don't really think of, I'm going to try to make a horror story per se. I like weird literature. I like horror that is, how should I say it, that is a bit classy, a little understated. I adore M.R. James's short story, Lost Hearts. I think that's a marvelous story. The Wailing Well by him is a marvelous story. Mm-hmm. And when I've learned, take your time. If you are let's say you have to kill a character, it's all right to take your time with it, and try to write it beautifully in a way. Roald Dahl that was one of his strengths as an artist. He could write about the most weirdest, bizarre things in a very beautiful way, very understated, still bizarre, still mighty weird, but handled in a very, very nice way where you could really sit and seep it in and not run away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel that way about Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm currently reading that through with my younger daughters. And
good.
Yeah, my oldest is 8.5. So she's very smart, and she gets it all. My youngest is 6, and she doesn't like it at all. She's actually bored at night listening to me read to her. Yeah, because it's just a lot of the words and the concepts. She's still learning how to be a human, so it goes over her. But my 8.5-year-old, I asked her, the other night, why do you like this so much? Why do you like me reading this to you? And she goes, Dad, I love it. It's so suspenseful. I can't wait to find out what's happening next. But I just love the way that the sentences are so long, but there's so much meaning in all the different words, and all of the humor. There's hidden humor, and there's very open humor, and there's so many absurd, roundabout non sequiturs, and just it's so fun to read. It's definitely an adventure. So it's entertaining to, I guess, absorb those words in that way, kind of like how you were describing. So yeah, I mean, words are so powerful, and you're right. Like with your story, you took your time. You could easily write a story. Your story could have taken 5 minutes to read through if it was just like, oh, this woman moved in, really weird sounds. Maybe I should go investigate. Oops, I'm dead now. And you took your time to establish the characters, to show us why to care about the situation, to give us a little bit of like, I got to find out what's about to happen next. You did a very good job, I think.
Thank you.
Getting us from point A to point B. So what is your experience then in writing stories? Have you written novels? Do you write just short stories? Do you only stick within like horror or things like horror? What is it that you do?
Well, right now, I have been sort of puttering with a very fearsome book full of bile and anger. I struggle right now with longer forms of writing. Well, the longest thing I've just finished right now was a story, and it was actually wound up being 29 pages long, and that, for me, is a very long piece. The book right now is asleep. It's slumbering. I'm letting it rest. I have all these other ideas that are rushing and demanding my attention. And I don't think I can, at this point, I'm still a very young writer. I don't have any real original ideas, but what I hope to do is take a theme that has been, exploited or written about a lot, and I hope to tweak it in a certain way and maybe give it just a little bit of a fresh sort of an edge. Like the last thing I wrote that I completely finished was a story of the theme of a little child thinks that there's a monster either under the bed or in the closet. That's been done a million times. I found out I have a special way of how to twist that around just a little bit, and I'm not going to say too much about it, but I expanded it so that this relationship that she has with this thing, whatever it is, develops throughout her entire human life cycle. So when she's a little girl to when she's a very, very old woman isolated in a nursing home. And that was a great journey for me. I was very pleased. It came out as well as it does. And sometimes I will think, well, I've got a title. Here's a title. I'm going to try to make a story for this title. Like, Val Lewton, when he was in his prime, the studios would say to him, all right, here's a title. I walked with a zombie. Now make a film, And, or here's Cat People. Make a film for that.
Right.
And, ooh. So sometimes I take that approach. And sometimes I just have to keep looking at being conscious what I'm doing, trying to figure out sometimes the simplest things are very hard to write. I don't know why, but you have to pay attention sometimes to the mechanics of, does this paragraph here make sense here? Do I have to shift this around? Am I being clear here? Do they understand what the action is that I'm trying to present? Things like that. It's a great, wonderful learning process. The best thing to do, as I've found out, is to try to have a nice, relaxed mind. Because the anxiety comes when you're trying to get yourself to sit down in front of the typewriter or the word processor or whatever. And then once you get there and you start tapping some keys and the mind starts to relax, the mind can actually work, has more creative ideas, It's much better that way.
Sure, it starts to just kind of slip out of you, maybe, or like you kind of get into the flow, like this zone of just brain to fingers typing it out or writing it out, however your process is, without needing to put like, oh, what do I do now? What's next? You know, putting that in the middle. You eliminate that and just let it be. That's part of letting your characters be who they are, and you're just there to record the activity, I guess.
There is one thing I'd like to mention briefly about something I believe very wholeheartedly about the human mind and creativity, I guess, is particularly. But over the years, I've been introduced to the idea that our subconscious brains are exceptionally powerful. We don't even appreciate probably how powerful our subconscious brains are. And from what I understand, the subconscious brain, not only is it very powerful, but it's very primitive. It's very goal-oriented. It has to have a goal. If you don't give it a goal, it's going to find one, and it finds ways to make things happen. So when I say to you things like, well, these characters just came to me, I mean, it's not quite that simple. I mean, I believe that somewhere in the subconscious, I mean, I'm thinking about, I want to write this thing. I have this little idea, this little kernel, and what do I do with it? That subconscious mind is already on it. It's already thinking. It's already plotting ways to make this thing happen. And if I just sit back and let that thing work, it will happen. Even if it's something that I really don't know how to fix, it's going to fix it. I have no doubt about it.
And did you find that process to be true when you were writing The Withering Room?
Yes. I mean, the title, I think actually, I was amazed that the title actually was the first thing that came. I don't know how that happened, but first it was The Withered Room, and then it was The Withering Room. So what do you do with that kind of a title? And, you know, everything that these people have said, like when Mrs. was saying to Mr. Yerby, you try living with a man that's got 6 fingers on a foot. I mean, that, I didn't consciously try to hammer that out. That just came out. And when Eddie is at the end, when he sobers up and says, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You want me to get in there? I want to live a long life, you know. And he finally looks at Jessime and the present state that she's in at that point. You know, he says to her, well, you're a nasty batch of blueberries. And oh, my goodness. And every time that I think I have finished a story, the brain says, no, you haven't finished. You've got to tweak this one word, then you're finished. And I say to it, oh, come on, you mean I have to go back? This thing is polished, it's done. No, you've got to tweak this word. I promise you, tweak it, it'll be great. So I said, okay.
Yeah, that's great. And look what it gave you. It gave you this beautiful story that we turned into this. I mean, this is like classic horror to me. You know, there's no, I mean, she's a monster, I guess, but we're not like afraid of her through the story. This is, to me, this could have been like a Twilight Zone episode. You know, it's about these normal people until at the very end it's not anymore and the truth is revealed. And that's a beautiful story.
Thank you. The one thing I want to mention as far as like real life influencing you, the part where Elias hears Anwen and Jessime, their struggle, and she's saying, stand still. Come over here and stand still. Now, that, I believe, was picked up. I heard on the news or something about the Jeffrey Dahmer case, and one of his neighbors was passing the apartment, and she heard him saying, stand still. I told you to stand still, you know. And that's kind of where I got that from.
Yeah, to pick little parts from things that you know have happened, you know, adds that little bit of a chill factor. I mean, yeah, what are they? Why would someone be saying something like that to somebody as you're passing their house? It just kind of adds a little bit to the mystery. Like, stand still. What are you doing? Are you holding something? You're balancing something? What's happening here? You're getting murdered? Tell me.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you dropped a few little clues here and there through the story that just kept it going because I never felt confused. And I was always like, something is brewing here. What's about to happen? This is very interesting. I wasn't trying to be like, wait, let me rewind this, and I don't understand. What is this part here? What does that mean? It flowed very well.
Thank you. I felt that way when I finally read Dracula. I said, this is going along pretty nicely here. It was one of the things I didn't think I could tackle. And then towards the end, in the middle or something, we hear Van Helsing. He's saying, okay, we're going to have a meeting, or we're going to do this. And the whole rest of the book seems like, we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to do this. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. Can't you do something else to entertain me? I had to drop that.
I have not actually finished. You're talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Yeah.
I have not finished that. I tackled that when I was younger, and there are definitely some books I need to go back to.
Well, if it wasn't for Renfield, it would have been like eating cardboard. Oof.
Oh, well, hey, as we draw to a close here tonight, I wanted to know if there was anywhere that maybe, online people could find anything that you do, or are there any books that people can look for? Is there anywhere that people who are listening now can find any other of your other works that you have written?
I regret to say that at the moment, I am like a little creature that you find under a rock. You lift the rock and you say, oh, look at that little thing down there. And you put the rock back. I'm not on any platforms at the moment. I've never even had anything published except for very early on. I was fortunate to get some haiku poetry published in a few magazines, and I even had some published in a English-speaking newspaper in Japan. But this is my first opportunity to have something like this brought to the attention of the public, of which I am very, very delighted and certainly grateful.
Are you encouraged maybe to do more of this? That maybe if you had some other ideas to turn into like a good 20, 30-minute production, would you be interested, I think, in submitting more, to other platforms that could turn this into, or turn your story into an audio drama?
Oh, yes, I think so. Incidentally, I know we're coming to the end, but two of my favorite, radio pieces, or two of my favorite radio platforms, if you've ever heard of Arch Obler's Lights Out, and if you've ever heard of Willis Cooper's Quiet Please, and also his Whitehall 1212, all those dramas are based on cases from the Black Museum in New Scotland Yard. I think those are marvelous, and those always encourage me. I'd like to do another piece eventually in the future, yes.
Ooh, I highly encourage it. Yeah, your writing skills are very awesome, so
well, thank you very much.
Definitely pursue more of this if you can, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it was great of you for joining us tonight, Matthew. I appreciate you taking the time to sit and chat, and I thank you for sharing your world with us here in the Grey Rooms.
Well, thank you very, very kindly for having me, and I wish the Grey Rooms and all the authors that are involved continued success and good health.
Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you so much. And as usual, the biggest thank you goes out to our fans and followers who listen daily and spread the good word of Bob. May you languish, lament, and loathe, but always with love. Hashtag
right.
Stay Gray. Take care and enjoy your evening, Matthew.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Thank you. And good night, folks. Bye.
Join us each week after every episode for another edition of Behind the Door.